Welcome back, fight fans. This is the Behind the Cage Door podcast, and this is the inaugural Matchmaker Monday, episode 1. Here with my boy Jake Noecker, and we're here to break down a little bit of a recap of UFC 290 and talk about some matchups we want to see in the future. Jake, how we doing this evening?
Great, man. Thanks for having me on. Met you a few times at Cage Fury. Good to be meeting virtually too. Appreciate it. And yeah, dude, last night, that was a wild pay-per-view.
I mean, it was crazy. We were just talking about it off camera. I mean, I was really left speechless from a lot of those fights, from the championships fight to Dricus du Plessis, all the way down to the early prelim openers. I mean, it was a great night from top to bottom. You want to give any quick little thoughts that you had before we get started?
Dude, I mean, you said it best. It was top to bottom, good card. And with a pay-per-view that big, International Fight Week, 2 title fights, every fight, pretty much the entire card is a banger. On paper, it's too good to be true. And for a card to actually deliver like that last night, very rare. UFC 290 is going to be a number people remember for a long time to come.
Oh, yes. And I think a lot of those fights that we saw last night, although this will be posted on Monday, last night, Saturday, we saw a lot of fights that I think are really going to be a talk of the town and are going to set up the future of the UFC. And so I'm very excited to break down a couple of these fights a little bit further and talk about some of these guys and how they match up going forward. So I think it's time that we pass it over to you and let's get started. Let's get talking.
Awesome, man. Well, I mean, first up, I guess we'll go fighter for fighter, yeah?
Yeah, we'll just go back and forth.
So Cameron Simon, my first guy I want to talk about. Early prelims. He's 9-0 as a pro, 3-0 in the UFC. If you count Dana White Contender Series, 4-0, and he's got 2 finishes with the promotion. Stud. Trains with Dricus du Plessis, who is also, we'll talk about later, on a tear right now. That whole South African team CIT is so talented. It's time to give this kid a ranked opponent. If you're going to build him up, don't wait till he's 28. Do it now while he's young. Number 14, Chris Gutierrez versus Cameron Simon, UFC 293 in Sydney, because it's going to be Izzy and Dricus probably headlining that card. Throw those 2 on it. Give Cameron someone ranked.
And I love that. I mean, with Cameron Simon, I mean, we've seen him have some weak points, but he has been dominant overall. He's been able to adjust on the fly, whether it's with his grappling or his striking. He's very dynamic. And I think a guy like Gutierrez, I mean, the 2 of them would put on a show. Gutierrez is also really excited. So I really like that matchup that you got there. And I think the key there is Dricus du Plessis, Cameron Simon on the same card. It goes hand in hand at this point. It's money. And the South African people, I mean, they're representing really, really well right now. I mean, last night, and we can talk about it more in the future, it was a bad night to be a Mexican MMA fighter, but it was a great night to be a South African MMA fighter.
Yeah, they got a lot of hype down there, and just, I'm not trying to knock Chris here. Chris is extremely talented, but getting up there in age, number 14 with a loss. What's the ceiling now? Where do we go from here? Perfect opponent to build Cameron up on. And if Cameron loses, Chris gets his notch in his belt. It's a win-win for both fighters, in my opinion. You got to make the fight.
Oh, yeah, and I think that's one that Dana and the matchmakers, they're going to be really looking at. And so you heard it here first. When that is booked for 293, Jake Noecker created that matchup. Don't let anybody else tell you anything.
Speaking into existence, bro. Speaking into existence.
We may as well. But as we move forward, let's give a little spoiler. Let's give a little free additional content. We only said we're going to talk about 6 fighters, but Dricus du Plessis, we mentioned that a little bit earlier. I mean, I think his next matchup's pretty obvious.
Has to be Izzy, yeah.
I mean, that cage time was interesting. I don't know if you have any reactions that you want to share about that.
Dude, it was just, honestly, I think Dricus won the interaction, obviously. Izzy, it kind of cringed it out. I didn't even think the swearing, the racial tension was the worst part of it. I thought the worst part of it is when he started talking about 26, 26, and me. Started stumbling. First of all, it's 23 and me, idiot. Second, when Dricus came back and hit him with, yeah, I'm from Africa, but I'm not your brother's son. You win the exchange, man. So fight has to happen. Put it in Sydney, UFC 293 in October.
Oh, yeah. And I was watching the MMA Gurus, his reaction afterwards, and he says some crazy stuff, but I really like what he said. I mean, at the end of the day, Dricus was the professional out there, and he was very professional about it. And you can see the real estate that he has in Israel's head already, and they haven't even been training for that fight yet.
And I think Izzy starches Dricus. I just think it's a bad matchup. Izzy's going to piece him apart, but he's inside of his head, and it's MMA. Anything can happen. So that fight's got my money all day.
And I agree, but where I disagree is I actually think Dricus has a really good chance. I mean, I had Dricus against Whittaker. I thought he put on a great performance. He looked dominant. His power was obvious. And I think he pushes a pace. And I think that nose surgery,
it might be real.
It might be real. I mean, he was not mouth breathing like he normally does. He looked a lot less he looked like he was more fluid in his motions, and he was dominant. He really was dominant. And I think between his natural instinct of grappling with his natural born power, I think he can give Izzy a run for his money. And we saw what Pereira's power did to Adesanya. And not to compare apples to apples, but I think Dricus has a really good shot at this.
I mean, it's the best fight in the middleweight division for him, both storyline-wise and skill-wise. Maybe other than Khamzat Chimaev, just because it's Khamzat, but he's never fought at middleweight yet, so who knows what happens there. But yeah, it's not just a good storyline. It's a good fight. And it's not, even though I think Izzy's going to win and piece him apart, it's not a walk in the park. This could go either way.
And that's going to be a fun fight. I know the fans are going to be out for that. And the pre-fight build-up, those press conferences are going to be nuts.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good.
Oh, yeah. So I'm excited for that. But I'll take over here. The next guy I want us to talk about today is Tatsuro Taira. I mean, Tatsuro, he's a stud. 14-0 now in the flyweight division, a division that at one point in time wasn't as well regarded. And it's really a deep division. And there's a lot of talent up and coming. And we saw that the title getting changed hands. I mean, the division moves just as fast as the athletes. And so I think for Tatsuro, as much as he looked great and dominant and really won that fight, I do still think there's another level that we need to see from him. His striking has not been perfect. He got dropped in that first round. He hasn't always been the most dominant striker. And for as many finishes as he has, I believe 10 out of those 14 wins against the higher levels of competition more recently, he's been a little bit more of a natural wrestler and less of that finisher. So I think Tatsuro needs one more fight before he sees the rankings. That's me personally. And I think if a dominant win would have jumped him up to the top 15. But I think because of his performance, although great, I think he's looking at another up-and-comer who also is equally as deserving with a top 15 opponent. And for me, I have it being a friend of my show, actually just interviewed him. I think a perfect matchup for him would be Carlos Hernandez.
Okay, I like that.
And I think Carlos would be a great matchup for him because Carlos comes from a wrestling background, but Carlos also has very, very good striking. And so I think it'd be a very good test to see where Tatsuro really is. Can Tatsuro hang out on the feet with an aggressive striker that has a little bit of everything? And a guy that is also a good wrestler who's shown the susceptibility to get taken down, but then fights his way back up quick and has that jiu-jitsu and wrestling base. And I think it'd be really good to see where Taira is. And with a win there, Taira would be undeniably deserving of a top 15 shot. And I think likewise with Carlos. I think if Carlos was able to take the O, I think there's nothing that you can do, regardless of how you like that ending with Denise Bandar a few weeks back. I think there's nothing you could say about him not being deserving of a top 15 shot. And I think it'd be a great litmus test. So what do you think here?
I mean, you pretty much said it all best. One, the flyweight division completely reignited. It's exciting again. It's deep again. There's not going to be 5 or 6 fighters on the UFC 5 video game roster, right? We're going to have a full division because it's a great division now and it's been rejuvenated. 2, yes, Tatsuro Taira is amazing, but he's not quite ready yet. The striking, it's an issue. He shouldn't be getting dropped by the people he's getting dropped by. Nobody can compete with his grappling in the division except for maybe Muhammad Makayev, right? But you can't win every MMA fight, especially as you climb into the rankings, with grappling only. You have to have a striking background. You have to have a base there a little bit, and he needs to develop that. So I agree. Absolutely. One more fight, maybe 2 more fights. He has to show that dominance. Once he does, give him to the rankings and feed him to the Sharks because he's very close to being ready.
Oh, yeah. And And what's impressive is I'm 22, almost 23. He's 23 years old, performing on the highest stage and doing it well. So let him take his time, let him develop his career, build his brand. And one day, if he keeps winning, I mean, he can be a serious contender in the division.
Yeah, Tatsuro Taira, I have bet on him by submission every fight so far. Even the ones I've lost, I don't feel bad about because he's that good, and I do it again every time. Like he needs to, like you said, he needs to get that finishing instinct a little bit more.
And I'll give him the credit. I mean, he's got disgusting ground and pound and quick submission.
Yeah.
He loves throwing those elbows.
Elbows were great last night.
Oh yeah, but against a guy like Edgar Chairez, I mean, he maybe he was a little bit hated on in the build-up to the fight, but he defended himself very well against Clayton Carpenter when he was on the Ultimate, or on Dana White Contender Series, excuse me. And I'm not too surprised that he was able to defend himself and stay in it. But I do think that for Taira on that stage, a finish is what they were looking for and what the UFC was expecting. And so it's time to get him another big win. And maybe the pressure for the finish won't be on as much. Maybe he just needs to go out there and win in convincing fashion to get himself to the top 15. Maybe it doesn't need to be flashy finishes.
Just not get dropped in the first round. That's it.
Yep. And I think one of the fights that happened last night and involved a lot of dropping, a lot of hammers, was that Jalen Turner Dan Hooker fight. So I want to start talking about that fight a little bit because that was exciting. And I didn't understand the split decision. I thought the Hangman really won that fight. And I thought that was a great fight. So let's just talk a little bit about the fight first.
That was, I mean, aside from the co-main event, that was probably the fight of the night, right?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, it was a banger from the first minute to the last minute. Those guys were throwing down, and those
even till
body kicks
afterwards in the hospital, they're taking pictures together. Like that was all around what you look for as an MMA fan. Great fight. I was all over Jalen Turner until the weight miss. And it wasn't even so much the weight miss. It was more so him afterwards. He was talking to the media and he said, you know what? This really throws off the vibes for this week. I don't love how I'm feeling going into this fight. Never heard a fighter say that before. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, we got a fight ahead of us now, boys. And then Dan Hooker goes in there, breaks his freaking wrist, and still puts it on him for 3 rounds. They get bloody. Dan's blonde hair turns red. Jalen Turner's dropping, crumbling, still making it all 15 minutes. That's just like everything you want from an MMA fight. And Dan Hooker, thank you for that underdog cash, my boy.
Yes, sir. And I think Jalen, he normally looks, very thin and slender because he's 6'2", 6'3" at 155. I mean, he was the tallest and longest fighter on the card, and he wasn't even the heaviest guy there. Mm-hmm. So I think when you see him miss that weight and you saw his body language, he was demoralized. And on Embedded all week, he was saying this was the best weight cut he ever had. And then he misses it and chooses not to try and shave off the last 2 pounds. So, and that was telling.
You interview fighters. Have you ever had a fighter not say it's the best weight cut they've ever had?
I mean, never. No. Let's be real. They never want to show anything of
then they miss weight and you're like, okay, that's interesting. So yeah, Jalen Turner, he'll get it back next time, but he's a big lightweight, maybe too big of a lightweight.
Yeah, and I could see him moving up to 170. It might be best for his career, but a guy that used to be at 145, now a stalwart at 155, and he's an absolute certified badass. I mean, the Charles Oliveira haircut, hairstyle. I mean, he came out and he took a beating, he gave a beating, and he persevered and showed that toughness and that grit that you want to see in a fighter.
Yeah, he even had the new tattoos and everything. Yeah, Dan Hooker's the man. So who do you want him to fight next?
Well, I think that's a great question, Jake, and that's why everybody tuned in today to watch us talk about it. And I think that it's going to be a really good fight for him and for his opponent. I think the guy that I have him matched up with is an up-and-coming guy, and most guys in the division would say no to him. And I just don't think that's Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's 23-12. He's fought everybody in the division, and so I want to give him someone that's 20-3. Nobody wants to fight him. We just saw him fight a few weeks ago. I want to see him against Arman Tsarukyan. And I think that's
a dangerous fight.
I think that's a banger. I think that's a fight
banger.
I think that's a fight that ends quick on both sides. I think Hooker's looked strong. He's looked thick. His chin's held up. I think he's shown a little bit of wrestling a fight ago or 2 fights ago, and he's always had, that good defense. And I think Arman Tsarukyan is very well rounded. I think a lot of guys are scared of him, and Dan Hooker's scared of nobody. And I think you put that on a fight night early in the year main event, or you put that on a main card, maybe to start Q1 of next year, because Dan Hooker has some surgery that he needs to do.
Right.
He needs to recover a little bit. And I guarantee you, when the UFC starts calling it lightweights, hey, do you want to fight Arman Tsarukyan? They're going to get a lot of people hanging up the phone. And so I think that gives them some time to let Dan Hooker heal. And I think you find that as a high profile fight, and that's going to be one that's exciting.
Well, I mean, you just saw Arman Tsarukyan had to take a co-main event against Joaquim Silva because nobody would fight him. Joaquim's a great fighter, but he's unranked. He had no business being in there with Arman per se, especially at this moment. So, yeah, I don't think that's unrealistic for a bunch of top 3 guys to turn down Arman, like Dustin, Justin. They're all busy. Everyone's tied up. Maybe Dan Hooker gets that call. But I am hearing some rumblings of Islam possibly taking on Arman in Abu Dhabi because who is he supposed to fight? Oliveira said he's not going to be ready. And then every other lightweight is tied up right now. So that's a rumor I'm hearing, and that would also be a great fight.
And I would be definitely game to see that fight. I think Arman's a guy that that he's going to be consistent killer out there. He's going to be able to give it to you no matter who the opponent is. He's going to be able to find a way that he matches up well. And I think whether he's fighting slightly back against a veteran like Dan Hooker or he's fighting up, I think either way, he can get a big win and help build his profile and keep building a strong name for himself as he searches for his way to get up to the top of the rankings. And I think 2 guys like Hooker, Tsarukyan, if that's a matchup that could be made, I think that's a fight that is worthwhile for people to see and would get people excited. One thing I said a lot about last night's card was take a friend that might want to watch MMA and show them last night's card. They'll become a fan. I think a Tsarukyan Hooker fight is the same exact situation. If you have a friend that wants to get into MMA, if that's a fight that's made, they need to see that and they'll love it from that point forward.
Yeah, that's a banger fight written all over it, and no matter who wins that, right in that title picture. So I'm
100%.
all on board for Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker to throw down. That'd be a good one.
100%. And that lightweight division is deep. The BMF belt in just a few weeks is going to be up between Dustin and Justin. And I'm really excited to see how that division plays out. My guy, Charlie Doe Bronx, I think he's looking great after that Beneil Dariush win. And I think that division is really exciting moving forward.
Yeah, lightweight's always been a great division, and it just hasn't slowed down since it's been the deepest division. It's always in contention in that realm.
Oh, yeah. And so moving forward, there's a guy that also is in a division that we've been talking about a little bit, and I know you wanted to mention him. So who do we want to talk about next?
So it wasn't the co-main, it was the co-main event last night. Someone we mentioned earlier, Dricus du Plessis, beat up Robert Whittaker. Was not expecting that. I was all over Bobby Knuckles. I wrote an article about it. I talked about it on the radio show. Was telling all my buddies, yeah, man, Robert Whittaker, throw him in a parlay with Volkanovski. Let's cash that money. I just thought he was better everywhere this fight goes. And I was completely shocked, was wrong. And Dricus du Plessis, for like the 4th fight in a row, cashed a crazy underdog ticket, and rightfully so, getting that next title fight. Now, the question is, what's next for Robert Whittaker, right? 32 years old. You got to wonder how much age is starting to become a factor. But it's also interesting because Dricus is the only person he's lost to other than Israel Adesanya since 2014, man. So it's not like he's washed. He's still a top contender. It's just, what do you do with him? Because he's fought Izzy. He doesn't have that shot. All I can think of is there's another guy on the sidelines who tweeted out that he was very upset about the outcome of that fight because he thought if Rob won that fight, he would have gotten the shot against Izzy rather than Dricus. And this man is the loudest guy I've ever met in my life, Sean Strickland. I think you got to do Sean Strickland and Robert Whittaker right now. Great fight. Put it as a title eliminator for when Dricus and Izzy are done. And then I was also saying backup plan, worst case, if Paulo Costa loses to Ikram, he's about the only other middleweight Robert Whittaker hasn't fought yet. So Robert Whittaker and Paulo, Robert Whittaker and Sean Strickland, got to do it. Those are the legacy fights.
And those are high-profile fights. I mean, Paulo Costa has a fan base. Sean Strickland has a fan base. They're both good on the mic. I mean, that would be a fun fight. And I think a guy like Robert Whittaker, who's really fought the who's who of the division and has
Everyone.
had such a good career. I mean, it's hard to find a matchup for him, but those fights would be bangers. And I'll even throw this in there because I like your backup plan. I like that idea, but I even think if Ikram Aliskerov beats Paulo Costa, that would also be a good fight for Ikram because they're going to push him straight to the top. And I think who better to show that you're ready for a title shot, that you're ready for title contention than the number one contender. I mean, now he's not, but he's been the number one contender for the longest time. He used to be the champion. I mean, Whittaker's the guy to prove yourself against. And so I love that Sean Strickland matchup. I think that would be extremely fun. Two guys that are going to keep it on the feet. They're going to box. I don't even think they're going to throw that many kicks. Whittaker's going to do his little 1-2 high kick, but that's going to be a lot of jabs, a lot of straights, a lot of coming forward in a chess match. And I think that would be really fun to see. And you can put that on the main card of a pay-per-view, and that'll help sell a card really, really well. I like that fight. That could be a potential banger right there.
And the buildup would be great because Sean's such an ass. It would be so good, man. It would be so good.
Oh yeah, and a guy like Whittaker, I mean, he's always the respectful guy. He's always calm, cool, and collected. But I don't know if this was a little kick in the ass that he needed to say, okay, I need to take my career in a second gear and keep it going so I can have some longevity in the sport. Because he's had a great career, but what do you do if you've lost to the champion multiple times and now you've lost to the guy that's next in line? Who do you match up with? And so I think that this is a really good conversation to have, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
And I can tell you right now, if you're Robert Whittaker, you are very severely rooting for Dricus du Plessis to beat Israel Adesanya because I thought he looked much better against Dricus until he didn't than he ever did against Izzy.
And I agree. And I think that I think Dricus also made it look a little easier than Izzy ever made it look. I think
he got in there quick, man.
And I think you saw some fear from Whittaker, a fear that you didn't see when he was fighting Israel. So I think a Dricus win will show that Dricus is really that level, and maybe it was just an off night for Whittaker and he can rebound.
It's possible, but I'll tell you right now, bro, Dricus is that level. He's a beast.
He put South Africa on the map, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, dude. UFC Africa, come on, bring it on. 2024.
And just wait, they're gonna make that announcement after the next Ngannou announcement. They got to keep one-upping him.
Yeah, you're right, dude. They don't do it the same night. It'll be like special announcement. We're going to Africa. Oh my god.
And it's like, no way, Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury. Oh,
UFC's going to Africa.
I mean, it's crazy. They know what they're doing. The UFC. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, they're. I love them. I love the evil genius corporation mentality. It works, man.
Oh, yeah, it's that big dog mentality. And there was another big dog last night in the co-main event. I mean, it was Mexican Independence Day, and Brandon Moreno was defending his belt, and Alexandre Pantoja 2-0 against Brandon Moreno, 1-0 officially. And that was a crazy fight. Let's talk about that fight real quick.
Yeah, man. Alexandre Pantoja, I looked at the odds, and I was like, this is a very, very close fight. Even though Pantoja won twice before, and now it's certainly a pick'em. So I looked at the odds and I was like, you know what, whoever's the underdog, I'm going to go with in this fight. I'm going to put a little bit of money on. And that was Pantoja. He closed at like plus 160. And he did not look like a plus 160 at all in that fight. He started out so good. He lulled a little bit towards the end of round 2. And I was like, oh, maybe Moreno's going to turn it back up here. Comes out round 3, snags a takedown, and kind of just keeps it going through round 5 to claim the belt, become and new. Was very, very impressed by him, and well-deserving winner of fight of the night.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was a great fight. That got the whole town talking. MMA Twitter was going nuts. I know a lot of people that were in the crowd were hoping it was Brandon Moreno, but when I saw that 49-46 Moreno card, I was questioning myself because I like Brandon Moreno just as much as the next guy. And yeah, the significant strike numbers favored him, but Pantoja, he dominated the control. The fight was where he wanted it to be, and he just looked like the stronger guy out there. It was a really good fight, though. It really was.
I scored it 49-46 for Pantoja, but that was the closest 49-46 there is. Like, I had Pantoja taking 1, 3, 4, and 5. I think he clearly took 1, 4, and 5, 2 and 3. 2 was Moreno, but 3 was up in the air. But it was a very close fight, and it was in no way one-sided, despite what the scorecard said. But yeah, dude, that 49-46 Moreno scorecard, I was like, what? How did that happen?
It was just like that Jalen Turner card where it's like, did you really just score Jalen Turner to win the third round? I'm not sure
Yeah,
about that.
it was weird, man. And it kind of now, like, the question obviously for the show is what's next for Pantoja? Obviously one, defending the title. A lot of people are saying, well, Moreno, does he get the rematch? I say no. They fought 3 times. He lost 3 times. That's not to say he can't get back there and fight Pantoja again, but let's stop with this flyweight rematch stuff. We don't need to see Figgy and Moreno 4, and we don't need to see Moreno and Pantoja 4. Like, we're
Yeah.
good. Let's see some fresh blood, especially because of how deep the flyweight division is. And that being said, I think you have to have a title eliminator fight. Pantoja's going to need some time to heal. 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it be. I expect we'll see him again 2024. In the meantime, there's no definitive this guy's next in the flyweight division. So I think you got to match up Amir Albazi and Brandon Hoyvel against each other for a title eliminator. They're the top 2 of the division. Whoever wins that gets Pantoja. And I wouldn't even be upset if Manel Kopp got in there too, because the 3 of those contenders are the future of flyweight. So that's who Pantoja needs to fight next.
And I really like that, because I do think, although Moreno is the very popular flyweight, he might have been the one that was the A side selling the fight. But I think a guy like Pantoja, he's willing and able to fight anybody. And I think having him beat Moreno for a 4th time, I mean, law of averages are going to revert back to the mean. It's a fist fight. Everybody has a 50% chance. Him winning that fight 4 times in a row, I mean, I don't know if that's smart for him. Now, I do want to throw something out there. And it might be kind of out of left field and crazy, but one thing that I could see, because I do think Pantoja is going to take some time off, enjoy his family, and bathe in his victory for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that a guy who was fighting at bantamweight might actually throw his name into the picture as well. I think a guy in Triple C, Henry Cejudo, I heard a couple mentions of him maybe at flyweight. Maybe what we can do in the meantime is see a little Brandon Moreno, Henry Cejudo main event of a fight night. And then I like that Royval versus Amir Albazi fight for the title eliminator. And then you can kind of have both of those winners depending on how that outcome goes, because obviously it's a fight game. Someone might get hurt. Right. You can then have 2 winners, both deserving of a title shot against Pantoja. And if for whatever reason, I heard he might take a little bit extra time off. So if for whatever reason he's taking a little bit more time off, you have the ability to then say, okay, let's have an interim title fight. And you can then put Triple C, who also sells cards, fight Moreno. That's going to be a banger right there that a lot of people would like to see. You have Royval, who they've already promised the opportunity at a title shot with Amir Albazi, who's up and coming. And you've got 4 guys all willing and able to take on the title. I think it would be a great problem for the UFC to have at the flyweight division.
That's a good problem. I'm a big Triple C fan, and no matter how cringy he is, he did a lot for the sport, specifically the flyweight division. So to see him come back down there, challenge Pantoja or get in the mix, yeah, man, say less. You had me at Triple C.
And I mean, I think the King of Cringe can always satisfy a little bit of everybody's entertainment needs on a Saturday night. So I think the flyweight division has a lot of possibilities. And I think a Royval matchup versus Pantoja in the future, although we've already seen it once, I think seeing it a second time, I know we said we don't want to see all the rematches, but I think that would be a crazy fight. And even Amir Albazi, I think Amir would give a really good fight to Pantoja as well.
Yeah, it's just like, despite the Hoyvel and Pantoja fight before, they're both different fighters. It's not like the 4th matchup between Moreno. It would be the 4th fight again between Moreno and Pantoja. We just saw that with Figgy, I don't know. I'm not a matchmaker in the UFC. I have no say in any of this except as a fan. Let's move it along. Let's get some fresh blood in here.
But today we are the matchmakers. I don't know if you're playing the UFC's matchmaking game or little prize contest they've got going on.
I'm not yet, but I saw it.
I'm going to have to. I mean, I can't turn down the opportunity to show them what I've got.
Yeah.
But that maybe they'll pay attention to the show first. But I think we should go talk about that main event, because I think that main event was crazy. Volkanovski, Yair Rodriguez. I thought Yair, and I think Volk also thought that Yair would be very dangerous for Volk. And Volk silenced that. He looked dominant. What are your instant reactions from that fight?
I can't say I'm surprised, honestly. I just was so heavy on Volk here. He's the best fighter in the UFC right now, pound for pound, in my opinion. Obviously, John Jones is John Jones. Islam beat Volk. I also scored Islam to win that fight. I know that was controversial. I thought Islam won. Very
I had
close. I
Volk.
just think, yeah, so many people had Volk. It's so split, and it was such a close fight. It's just, dude, Volk's that dude, man. And I knew he was going to go in there. I knew he wasn't going to get knocked out. I knew he'd try to grapple and win that fight, and he did, man. I don't know what's next for Volk. He has to move up. Ilya would be great, but yeah, Volk's the featherweight goat. I'm gonna go as far as saying that.
And I think he's making a case for himself to be the GOAT. I mean, I know John Jones is John Jones, but if Volk keeps doing what he's doing at a high level, I mean, he's really
Yeah.
short, he's really stocky, but what was impressive to me was he really knows how to use his reach. I mean, the fact that he had a longer reach than Yair, who's 5-6 inches taller than him, once you saw that Volk could establish himself and use that reach and use his strength, I mean, it was over as soon as you realized he was comfortable in there. But here's where I disagree with you. I think Volk versus Islam, I would love to see it. Don't get me wrong, but I think the next fight for Volk is not Islam. I don't think it's moving up. I think the UFC would be doing themselves a huge disservice by bringing him up to 155. I think you have a star in Charles Oliveira, who might be the most popular guy in the UFC. And I think an Oliveira Makhachev rematch might be the best thing for the UFC. And I think from that fight, you might get a crazy UFC 300 fight for Volkanovski, moving back up to lightweight to become the 2 division champ. And I think you weighed off on that fight for 155. So it might be an easy way out. But I do think that the Ilia Topuria Alexander Volkanovski fight is one that would sell itself. I'm all
for it, man.
I think that you put Ilya in there, who's shown some weakness, just like Tatsuro Taira, a guy with an O, but he's shown some weakness. He gets hit on the feet. And although he dominated Josh Emmett, there were spots where you were like, oh my God, Josh Emmett just hit Ilya and hit him hard.
Yeah.
And so I think there's no one else for him to be tested against. You're not going to put Yair against Ilya. So put Ilya in the title match. See what he's got against Volk. And I think Volk is the right guy to beat him. Volk's got the grappling to match him. Volk's got the stand-up game to match him. And I think that you put Volk in there against Ilya. He gets a big win against an undefeated prospect. That card might be in Spain. You have him headlining in Spain. You keep building up Alexander Volkanovski's presence internationally. And then on UFC 300, hopefully what will be the biggest card ever, you throw Volk in there versus the number 1 pound for pound, or the number 2 pound for pound guy, 1 versus 2, Islam versus Volk, and you really see who the true number 1 guy is in the UFC. And so I think for the long haul, Ilia Topuria is the guy for Volk.
Hey, I would be all for that fight. I hope it works out that way because, yeah, that's the storybook way to do it for the UFC. And Ilya and Volk, they're such similar fighters. It would be like old blood versus new blood. Who's the man of featherweight? I'm all for that fight, man. That would be great.
And I think it would be a banger. It would sell itself. Ilia Topuria clearly has the support back in Spain. And Dana White's been saying, he's made them consider if they want to have an event there. So let's have an event in Spain. Let's put the number 1 pound for pound guy against Ilia Topuria, a young and upcoming undefeated guy. And let's just see what happens.
You know what's going to happen?
I'm
going to buy the pay-per-view.
And you know what? I'll buy it too.
There you go. And I bet you a bunch of other people would. That's a banger right there.
Oh, yeah. And the UFC's been doing a really good job at building up those cards that make people want to pay for the pay-per-view. No more illegal streaming. Let's give the UFC their money so they can give these fighters some money. Maybe they can start giving out some more bonuses because Jesus Aguilar not getting a bonus was just ridiculous, in my opinion. That was a disgusting knockout. But we've got 1 minute left in the stream. So any final thoughts before we got to close this out?
Dude, just thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. Always appreciate the airtime, the screen time. And then I know you don't hype yourself up. You're not cocky. So real quick, Jake, man, you do great work. For people that don't know,
I appreciate
working with Cage Fury over there, kicking ass, climbing the ranks, and now infiltrating the MMA media scene. So Jake, thank you so much, man. And keep it up, bro.
You as well, brother. Always respect to you. Always love watching your content. Check him out. What do you have going on this week? What do you want to pimp out real quick?
Just hit me up at Jake Noecker or on Twitter at Jake Noecker MMA. I got my Tapped Out show, a couple articles, fighter interviews. A lot of fun before Cage Fury 121 and 122.
Yes, sir. Very excited for the future. Lots of big things ahead. Jake and Jake, we're checking out here, but check us out, and we can't wait to see you on the next one.
Thanks, brother.